In this video, we'll be talking about the number one thing that you should prioritize when you're trying to heal, rebuild, or move forward. So, this is if anybody is struggling with a breakup, a divorce, a relationship keeping you stuck, or maybe some kind of life transition, and you're not sure what your very next steps should be, then this video is going to help you. Hi, my name is Emmy. I'm a breakup and relationship coach, and I help women and men heal, rebuild, and move forward after a relationship ends. And I help them get inspired for their next chapter in life. So, thank you for being here. So, most times when you're facing a problem in life, you can tend to focus all of your energy on the problem and how you feel about it. But what I've found to be true for myself and also for the people that I work with is that this only perpetuates the problem further, and it enhances how you feel about it because chances are you're probably running these thoughts that are repeating over and over in your mind about the problem and how you feel about it, rather than expanding your mind to go in a direction of finding solutions that work for you or feeling expansive. So, using a breakup as an example, okay? In the past, I went through numerous breakups with the same person over and over again. And so, what I used to do all the time is that I'd focus all of my energy, all of my thoughts, everything on the circumstance, right? I was like, okay, this is the problem. I'm going through a breakup. What is my ex doing or not doing? What is happening between us? Rehashing endless memories and moments, really dwelling on all of the external things that I had no control over. And so this made me feel super high levels of anxiety, depression, feeling lost, stressed out all the time, and all the other emotions that come with the feeling of loss or uncertainty. If your problem in this example is, okay, this person broke up with me or we broke up, yes, that's the thing that happened, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's your underlying problem. And so you're looking for the answer about how to fix your problem in the wrong place. You're looking for the answer externally. When I say that, I mean outside of yourself. So by the way, I plan on making another video about this because it's really important is how to identify what your problem actually is and then what are the tangible steps you can take to overcome it. Because if you're treating the wrong problem, then you're not going to get a solution that is really aligned to where you want to end up. It helps you understand what your point A is, what your point B is, and how to get there better if you know what the actual problem is, because if you don't do this, then it's like, treating yourself for having the flu when the real problem is that you have an inflamed cavity that's giving you flu-like symptoms. They have totally different treatments, right? So I'll kind of give you a story around this. I once worked with a man whose wife had asked him for a separation and even was taking the big steps of moving out of the house, but she hadn't actually been clear with him about whether they would get back together or she just needed space. And so, okay, what was he identifying as the problem? Well, the problem is that my wife wants a separation and my wife is moving out. Okay, that's the circumstance. But he was fixating in kind of the wrong area because his solution, if that is the problem, his solution was, well, then I'll just give her space. I'll let her do her thing. Even kept talking to her and helping her when she needed something from him, which was really respectful. And, I'm not judging him for being a nice person. And, I don't think anyone should treat each other badly. So, you should definitely respect somebody else's boundaries or wishes. But what I'm saying here is that the mistake he made wasn't using the situation to turn a mirror on himself. He was totally looking at the external thing that was happening. And so that gives your power to the other person, and it doesn't really empower you to do anything supportive for yourself. So Instead, he was just waiting in this limbo of not knowing how he should proceed in his life. Like, he didn't have any clarity. Am I now a single person? Am I still in a relationship? Am I living in this house by myself? Like, is she gonna move back in? Like, so many uncertainties, and he was kind of waiting on her decision to determine the outcome of what he should do next. And that logically makes sense, right? Like, we care about our partner, we wanna support them, also respect their boundaries. So I'm not saying, like, he should have, like, gone off and started dating right away or, like, just moved on with his life. What I'm saying is that when you can identify the problem, which in reality was he had to figure out his problem now is determining how he wants to move forward with this situation, not waiting to see how she wants to move forward. So when we started working together, we did some really, really honest, deep inner work, which led to a lot of self discovery for him. And he started to realize the things that he needed to change in his life and the way he was approaching relationships, but also his life. And this eventually helped him to reach a decision of how he wanted to move forward with this situation rather than just waiting around, which could have been like indefinitely. So, all of this leads to tell us what is the number one thing that needs to happen in these situations, okay, which is to follow my L3 philosophy. That's what I call it, L3. We've got 3 L's. The first L is love yourself. The second L is love your relationships, and the third L is love your life. So we're kind of taking that as a ripple effect. So if you think about throwing a pebble into the water, um, each concentric ring that's formed is happening because of the first pebble that was thrown in. So L1, loving yourself, that's going to ripple out and impact your relationships. How you are in your relationships is going to impact your life because we're thinking more than just romantic relationships here. We're thinking about friendships, family, coworkers, all the people. The L3 philosophy is something that I created and I now live by, and I have been for a while. I also teach other people how to do it because we have to think about the first ripple as our main focus when we're going through any kind of change or challenge or life transition. So, if you think about these 3 areas, these 3 L's like a stool, the stool cannot stand up without one of the legs present, and each one impacts the other. So, each one of the L's impacts the other 2 L's in your life. So, I'll give you an example of thinking about how L1, loving yourself, impacts the other 2 areas. Think of it as, again, the three-legged stool. So I had 2 different people come to work with me for relationship issues. They were both actually going through a divorce. And because of the work we were doing on loving themselves and doing tons of self-discovery, understanding themselves, thinking of like learning more about what their coping strategies in life are, what their patterns have been. Because of all that inner work and their openness to being completely honest and vulnerable, it ended up rippling into their career and their professional work, L3. So basically, because they were transforming themselves at their core level, L1, they ended up changing what they were doing in their career. So one of them ended up starting a business. He had been putting it off for so long because at his core, he actually didn't believe that he would be able to do it or sustain it. So that's super more of a core issue of loving yourself and believing in yourself, right? And it impacted his ability to take a leap and trust that he would be able to figure it out. And so after we did that work, he actually was able to take that leap, and then he sustained, the business for years to come. The other person ended up asking for a higher paying position in the same field that she was already working in because she realized how much value she brought to the company she was working for. This was pretty much very similar for what happened to me was when I was going through my relationship struggles and I started doing all of this self-discovery work, personal growth, just binging on transformational, materials. I started to grow my own self confidence and I got so much more clarity on the path that I wanted to be on that it incited changes that I wanted to make in my career because I realized that I now had a purpose that had shifted from what I had been doing for quite some time. So, because of these internal shifts, it impacted my decision to leave my 16-year career as a high school educator of biology and anatomy and physiology, which I love, by the way. But I knew that inside I had a shift in how I wanted to be helping people. And I wanted to start helping people heal their hearts and rebuild themselves at the foundational level so that they could rebuild their lives in a way that they felt, joyful and excited about again. And I wanted to do that because I had been through it. So I understand how it feels to be in that, lowest of lows and also the steps that you can take to pull yourself out of it. So, we're talking again about the L3 philosophy and why you need to prioritize these three areas when you're going through something tough. And starting at L1, loving yourself is the place to be. So, we're also talking about how they impact each other. So think about how L2, love your relationships, that can super impact the other two as well. So if you're in a relationship that is unhealthy or it's not supporting you, this has huge consequences. When I was in that on and off situationship for years, it deeply impacted how I felt about myself, which is L1, love yourself. And therefore, that impacted what I thought I deserved, not only in a relationship, but in my life. And it also impacted what I thought I was capable of. And I remember, even in the beginning of that situationship, I still had a lot of self-confidence and I had a lot of clarity around what I wanted in a relationship. And I remember that I broke up with that person numerous times, like in the beginning, because it wasn't aligned. But over time, I kind of started getting worn down because my own self-value started getting depleted. And so then I ended up staying in a relationship way longer than I should have because it was unhealthy for probably for both of us. So that's just an example of how L2, how much you love your relationships or how supportive they are can impact how you feel about yourself. And then that impacts, what you do in your work. So L3, which is love your life, that also impacts, and by the way, life, I'm using work as an example, but your life is of course so much more than just your work, right? I mean, it's like, are you having fun? Are you doing things that you've always dreamed that you wanted to do? Are you allowing yourself to even dream? Or are you keeping yourself in this kind of like tunnel vision or a box of like what you think your life should or shouldn't look like? So L3, love your life. This impacts loving yourself and loving your relationships. If you're not connected to your deeper purpose, for example, in your work, you can start to feel disconnected from your true self. And then that makes you feel disconnected maybe from a partner or from the other people in your life. And maybe I keep using work as an example, but maybe your, authenticity isn't there in what you're doing or what you're putting out into the world. And then your life is like Groundhog Day. Like every day you just keep waking up thinking like, is this all there is? So I just want to show you, the L3 philosophy is like you always need to come back to these three areas and just remember the pebble. The initial pebble that you're throwing in is L1. It's starting with loving yourself. So I want to go into that a little deeper because I think you hear the term love yourself all the time, but I think it's a really abstract thing. I know I used to get annoyed because I'm like, what does that even mean? Like I don't know how to love myself, right? So, I would say that loving yourself really means that you are going to allow yourself to learn so much more about you so that you can better understand yourself. Why do you do the things you do? Why do you think the things you think? Why do you feel the way you feel? It's learning about yourself to create a sense of understanding versus thinking about yourself with judgment or shame or guilt. And so, even though it sounds abstract, there are tangible things that we can do to take these steps. So, loving yourself looks like sitting down with yourself, like you would sit down with a friend, and say, "Tell me more about this. Let me understand where all this is coming from." It looks like asking yourself, "Is there something deeper that we need to bring awareness to? Or do we have blind spots that we need to explore further? Is there a way of being that isn't working for me right now? What way might work better?" So, this is loving yourself, right? Some people like in loving yourself to like, going to get mani-pedis, going to have a spa day, going to have a massage, which totally can, because those are forms of self-care. But loving yourself is so much deeper because it really means that you're coming to this point of acceptance of yourself, of all parts of yourself. And that first comes from understanding. And all of this leads, excuse me, leads to really, really great things and huge transformation. So, loving yourself looks like understanding so much more about yourself so that you can increase your own self worth and your self value. So, when I first started dedicating so many hours a week and ultimately years of my life to learning more about myself, and then also utilizing practices that help me reconnect with my body, my mind, my spirit on a new level, it brought numerous tremendous breakthroughs in all areas of my life. So, one example of this is that I learned about attachment styles. Now, this was like early on when I was, really starting to research relationships and, thinking about becoming a coach, but I had never heard of them before. And I remember that learning what my attachment style was gave me so much clarity and understanding as to why I was acting the way I was, why I was responding to certain situations, why I had the needs that I had. And because I was also learning the attachment style of what my partner at the time probably was, it helped me understand why he was acting the way he was and how it creates a dynamic between two people that just keep kind of going back and forth. And so this was huge because before I had learned about these, I viewed myself as just this broken, weak, needy, not good enough person amongst many other things. And I learned that these were just all kind of like side effects of your attachment style when it's like not at the healthy level. And so knowing this really helped me move forward and it was really powerful because it helped me understand that, oh my gosh, like all this time I thought that that's just like who I am, right? I'm broken, I'm needy, I'm not good enough, whatever. But it made me understand that's not who I am. These are actually just behaviors that I tend to lean toward because I didn't have awareness about them before. And the great thing about understanding your behaviors is that now that you know them, you actually have the choice to shift them or to change them if they're unsupportive and you want to move into a more healthy way of dealing with conflict or changing your life. And so this is really, really powerful because I would start to seek less of the things that I needed for myself from another person, and I started to give them to myself, which brought me into the more healthy space of my attachment style. So there was a lot less judgment of myself. There was a lot less judgment of my partner. And it also helped me understand how I interact with the world and how other people interact with the world because they have a completely different lens with which they're looking at life. And so understanding these things not only help you understand yourself, but also other people in your life, whoever those may be. So um, attachment style is just one example. I mean, I have so many different things that helped me learn more about who I am, and I still do. I'll probably make another video about that because there are some other like personality typing systems and just other things I found really valuable. It was, like when I started reading about them and listening to people talk about them, I felt like I was reading a book specifically about me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And when you can do that, you feel validated. You're like, "Oh, I'm not crazy. I just I'm just exhibiting behaviors of XYZ. So that was just one example of loving yourself. It's like learning more about who you are and why, and how you go about the world, how you go about problems, how you go about having fun. But loving yourself also looks like prioritizing self care practices consistently, knowing that tending to yourself is the best possible thing that you can do to reduce stress, to gain more connection to your intuition. This will help you bring clarity around decision making. I know, when people are going through a divorce or a breakup, there's so much stress that everything is unclear. It's like, oh my gosh, making a choice or a decision because you're so tired is like so hard to do. So, tending to yourself during this time is actually really important because you need to reconnect back with yourself at a deeper level with your being. Um, and we want to put you back in the driver's seat. So, what does different kinds of self-care look like? There's so many different things, but I'll just share some things that I have found really helpful over the course of my life, and particularly through that really, really challenging time through my multiple breakups and having this like drama with another person. Um, Over the years, self-care has been writing in a journal, both with and without prompts. Sometimes I would like to just free write and kind of like metaphorically vomit all of my, thoughts and emotions out in my journal, and that helped me to just really like release some things. But other times it would be really good to have a prompt or a question. Maybe I would ask myself a question, write that at the top of the page, and then go ahead and proceed to try to answer it. When you ask a question, it opens a thought loop, and your brain naturally wants to close that loop. And so your brain will start searching for different solutions, maybe in a way that it wouldn't if you were not asking yourself a question. So that's just another example of how you can use journaling and writing. But I also really liked using creative writing to help me process and vision where I wanted my life to go. So I actually ended up writing and publishing a memoir about that spicy relationship. And it was a huge piece for me being able to love myself because it created a lot of understanding of what was going on with me at the time. And it brought me to this sense of accepting parts of myself that I had originally felt maybe shameful about or guilty about, and it really kind of broke me out of my little kind of like life box that I was keeping myself in. Other kinds of self-care, because we're still on L1 here, we're on love yourself. Other kinds of self-care looks like movement that you enjoy. So for me, that has changed over the years, and it's also been multiple different kinds of things. I really love dancing. I feel free, euphoric, and so sometimes, I can go out to dance, but I can also dance in my house, I'll throw on a song in the kitchen. I really love listening to music while I'm cooking or, even cleaning, and you just dance, right? You let it out. But I've also found yoga to be really, really helpful in my grounding practice because, as I said, we can focus our energy on external things, and yoga has been something that has helped me come inside and be able to balance myself internally. So, I remember, when I first started yoga, it was really, really hard for me, and I was like, "I hate this crap." And then it's a practice. I kept on showing up, and I started liking it a little bit more, and, there even was a time where I was renting one small room in this bigger house, and the only space that I had to do it was between my closet and my bed, and there was literally enough space for just the width of a yoga mat, and I would do yoga there. I remember coming home from school as a teacher every day and doing my yoga in my small little room, at 3 p.m. every single day. And it's practices like this that help you get in touch with your body, which is really important when we're stressed because we spend a lot of time in our minds. And so I still practice yoga, and it's just an example of finding something that works for you. Um, in the past, I still enjoy indoor rock climbing. I would remember specifically, getting to the top of a trail, like indoor rock climbing, how they have like the different colored fake rocks that it's like has a rating for I don't know if it's called a trail. I don't know what it's called. You can let me know in the comments. um, but I remember like every time I would like make it to the top, I would feel so accomplished. And I was like, yes. I'm like, I pushed myself, I made it to the top and I didn't quit. And it was like these little, like, hits of success, these little hits of dopamine, of, like, proving to myself that I could do something, and it was through movement, it was through challenging myself physically. Even in yoga, like, it's very, very challenging if you're doing a vinyasa and, have to hold a pose for a long time, it's so uncomfortable, and if it's hot in there, you're just, like, sweating all over the place, and the yoga instructor will always just remind you to come back to your breath. And it probably took me a decade of practicing yoga and breathing in yoga to now actually use breath in my own life. So now when I'm like really upset about something, I actually notice myself going to my breath naturally and taking deep breaths to calm down my nervous system. Um, Another example of self care looks like quiet mindfulness activities. So for me, it's been meditation. Again, another thing that I hated when I first started it. Like, I had the hardest time even sitting still for like 2 minutes. I felt like it was like an itch that you can't scratch. It was just like really hard. But over time, my meditation practice has evolved tremendously, and now it is something that I will not go without because I know it sets me up for the day so much better. But self care is a practice and it's showing up for yourself, even when you don't want to. And it's not like the kind of thing that you have to, judge yourself for or, be really negative towards yourself if you miss a day. It's just like it's about getting back to it. So you can always start fresh tomorrow. You can always start fresh today if you want. So meditation is just one, but another thing that I really love to do that helps me with mindfulness and being in the present moment is painting by number. I really have to pay attention to these tiny little details and what color to use. And my mind might go off, but it's just this like relaxing time that I gift to myself. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put my timer on. I'm going to spend 1 hour just painting. And I'm not going to be stressed out about all the other things I should be doing during this time. I'm actually just going to enjoy this time as my self nurturing. In the past, when I was in high school, this looked like playing the piano for like 2 hours every single day after I would come home from school. That was the way I would unwind, is the way I would connect with myself musically. I mean, that was just like food for my soul. When I was in my early 20s, mindfulness looked like quilting and knitting. I mean, I had so many sweaters, I didn't know what to do with them, so I started giving them to people and even selling them at some point. But the point is to find mindfulness activities that you actually like, and that you will make time for. I should probably make another video just on self-care ideas. So let me know in the comments if you want to hear more things that I've done in the past, or maybe even that clients have told me that works for them. It's really super important to L1, which is love yourself. Okay, so I just spent a lot of time talking about love yourself as being a number one focus when you're trying to heal, rebuild, and move forward for whatever it is in your life. I talk to a lot of people who are empty nesters now and they aren't really sure what direction they want to go. Maybe they're even grieving the loss of their old family life and what their new family life is going to look like. So, you always wanna go inside first, okay? And that's going to ripple out into L2, which is love your relationships. So, loving your relationships is so much more than just attributing your happiness to somebody else, whether it's a partner or a friendship or whatever. So in the L2, we want to think about how we can elevate our relationship skills. So I I have a process that I use with myself and also with other people. I call it my RED process. And RED, restore is the R, and that's kind of what I think about for L1. Restoring the connection with yourself is how you can love yourself. The E is elevate. What skills do you need to learn or acquire in order to kind of elevate your life, elevate your relationships? And so one thing that you can kind of think about is how are you contributing to a relationship dynamic? And this could be any kind of relationship. I have a course called Wake Up from Your Breakup, and there's a whole entire lesson dedicated just to understanding what your role is or what it has been in a relationship dynamic that creates a specific outcome. So this can apply to any relationship, but especially romantic ones. So, as an example, when I started taking more responsibility for my role in a relationship dynamic, it really changes the whole relationship itself. So, my tendency, I know this about myself, is to be more reactive in a conflict, and it can cause my partner to retract or want to avoid the whole situation and me completely. It can cause the other person to close off or shut down. And this is the exact opposite of what I want to happen. I want to create connection. I want to feel close to my partner. So when I'm taking responsibility for my role, which is being reactive, getting angry, raising my voice or snapping, it's actually creating an outcome that is the opposite of what I want. So I'm not saying that the other person doesn't also play a role, but we're just really understanding how we contribute to a dynamic that's creating an outcome that maybe you either don't want or you want. So, here are some other things that you can think about regarding love your relationships. Like, if you haven't contemplated these things before, I highly suggest that you spend some time reflecting on them in your journal or talking to someone about it. Um, how do you feel about yourself when you're with another person? How do you feel about yourself when you spend time alone? Have you found yourself in the same kind of relationship multiple times, just with different people? So maybe the person that you're with always seems to have an addiction. Like maybe there were people in your family who had addictions, and now you've noticed that like multiple partners that you've had have been, an alcoholic or something like that. Or maybe you've always been a people pleaser and you notice that you're always in relationships where you are putting your own needs aside and you're tending to the other person. Maybe you put your own dreams aside rather than following your own aspirations. Maybe you're always a supporter of the other person and you don't ever really get to be the hero. So these are just things to kind of think about. Have you found yourself in like repeating patterns of types of relationships just with different faces? Um, I've had this next one come up numerous times with people that I have worked with, and maybe you've been cheated on multiple times. What does this mean? Like, why does this pattern keep happening? Why has it happened more than once? Now, be clear here. I am not showing up here being like, this is all your fault. The other person, the cheater or whatever, has a whole host of problems as well. But what I'm saying is that both people play into a dynamic. And so, okay, what might make somebody go cheat and have it happen to them numerous times, even with different relationships? Well, maybe, the role of that person is that they weren't able to or wanting to show up completely vulnerably. Maybe they weren't able to establish a deep connection with the other person was looking for or longing for. And so the other person's solution was to go find it somewhere else, right? So again, I'm not saying like, "Oh, this is all your fault." But what I'm saying is that when we can kind of turn the mirror on ourselves and say, "What can I learn from this?" Like, that's just thinking about it as being like, "That's kind of interesting that like, this cheating has happened like multiple times. Is there anything that I can shift that might change this dynamic or create, or maybe prevent me from choosing another partner that might have the tendency to do that?" Right? Maybe you're I had a client once say, "My picker is broken." The ability to pick a partner that isn't gonna cheat on you, right? So, again, just thinking about your role. Another thing that you can, reflect on for L2, love your relationships, is what's the narrative that you have about your relationship or relationships in general? Is it more fairy tale like, which could create maybe unreasonable expectations about the relationship or even the person, maybe how things should be? Or is your narrative about the relationship negative all the time? right? Oh, this never happens. He never does this or she never does that. So one thing I kind of see frequently in people who have gone through a breakup or they're frustrated with dating is that they have a narrative that is not at all supportive of what they actually want. Like when they tell someone their breakup or their dating story, right? Like, for example, let's say you're meeting up with people you haven't seen in a while, and they're always going to ask you, like, oh, how's so and so? Like, you have to tell them, like, "Oh, we broke up." That's what I call, like, your breakup story, right? Or, "Oh, how's dating going?" And then you tell them something. That's your dating story. So a lot of people have kind of a negative spin on their breakup or dating stories. They're putting themselves in a victim role, and it leaves no room for expansion into possibilities for their present or their future. I absolutely used to be like this. I was always the victim when I was talking about my situationship, and my ex in my head was always the villain, and so, it might come out that way in conversation. This did not help me move forward. What was my objective at the time? It was to get over him and move on with my life. It wasn't happening because I had this narrative that wasn't supportive. So, because I had myself in the victim role, I was not able to empower myself to make different choices. It didn't help me create something that I wanted until I was able to reframe my narrative. What was I telling myself all the time about that relationship, but also the kind of relationship that I could and ultimately wanted to be in? I put a lot of emphasis on this with people that I work with because sometimes you don't even realize that you're experiencing a reality in your own mind that you have come up with, that you can actually change that reality at any time. Like what you're thinking is creating how you're experiencing things. And you actually can change that so that you can enjoy your reality more. It's kind of similar to thinking positively about things, but it's really more advanced than that. We really want to reframe our thoughts to be not just positive, but supportive and expansive because we have to resonate with it. And so that's something that I teach actually, I believe, in lesson 2 and lesson 6 in my Wake Up From Your Breakup course. But it's just something that I want you to reflect on as well. There's so many things, in L2 that we could talk about, but I would be here forever. I could talk about this stuff forever, as you can probably sense. But I go into a lot more detail in my courses. So I'm gonna move on to L3, which is love your life, okay? Remember, L3 philosophy is that we're focusing on loving ourselves, rippling out to loving our relationships, which ripples out to loving your life. What does that mean to love your life? Of course, it's not perfect. There's always going to be ups and downs, and you're always going to have challenges come up. Loving your life is understanding that you are the creator of everything, even through unforeseen circumstances. How you choose to see it and deal with it determines what the outcome will be and how you'll feel down the road. So, L3 or loving your life involves having a really clear vision of what you want and where you're going so that you can figure out what the very next action steps can be that you can take to help yourself get there. This does not mean that you have to plan out your whole life. This just means that you have to have somewhat of a vision um, to help you be on the right path. So, one thing I love to do is create vision boards. I have found that when I create a vision board, it's usually good for like 1 to 2 years. Like the stuff that I put on there is are things that I would like to develop or attract into my life, and it usually ends up taking about that time for it all to become a reality. That could be different for each person. Maybe you have a 6-month vision board or a 5-year vision board. It doesn't matter as long as you've taken the time to sit down and actually reflect on it and visualize it. It just gives you a much more clear idea of what your point A is, which is where you are right now, where you're starting, what your point B could be, or what you want it to be, and then all of the little steps in between to get you there. So, when I say love your life, I am talking about what is the very next thing that you can be doing right now to get you closer to point B. So, some people refer to this as manifestation, the law of attraction, serendipity, goal setting, even prayer. If you're not clear about what you want, then you're gonna get wishy-washy results. And so, just as an example, like, let's say, okay, I wanna go on a vacation. You put that out into the universe. Maybe you even enter, a free vacation giveaway or something. But that is as specific as you got, just a vacation. Well, you might get that back, but maybe what you get is like staying in a hotel that's kind of gross. Maybe you have to fly with multiple connections and bad times or on a bad airline. Maybe the food that you're eating tastes like it just came out of the freezer. Maybe instead you could visualize and get really specific about what you want that vacation to look like when you're asking for it, right? So, visualizing it down to the nitty gritty, exactly the kind of experience that you want, doesn't mean that you'll get it, but there's a much higher possibility because now you're looking for those details in your life. You're noticing when they become present as opportunities through people or events or experiences. And so we want to be able to recognize these opportunities when they present themselves. And clarity and visioning is what's going to help you do that. So, L3, love your life, also looks like being courageous enough to dare. And if you remember the red process I was telling you about, the D in the red actually stands for dare, which means you're going to push yourself out of your comfort zone. You're going to be courageous to do things that might feel unfamiliar and therefore probably pretty uncomfortable to create a new way of being and therefore creating a new way of living. So, as an example, when I chose to leave my career as an educator, okay, 16 years of teaching high school, I had so much security in that job, right? Retirement, very reliable. I remember the day I was going to tell them that I was leaving. My whole entire body was shaking. I was walking down the hallway to the superintendent's office to give my notice. I was carrying the letter and I was like shaking. So many things were going through my body at the time and in my head. I was just like, "Oh my god, like what am I doing? This is crazy. This could be a mistake. I should just go back to my room and just stay being a teacher." All of the things. But it took so much courage for me to leave that job that had such long-term, benefits to leap into starting my own business, which what my soul was feeling called to do. Like, I really liked that job and I really enjoyed being a teacher. But at some point, I kind of felt like my soul was being jailed because there was something more, something different that I knew I wanted to do. And if I didn't allow myself to take that leap, then I would never know what would have happened. And that for me wouldn't have felt fulfilling. And so that was probably the farthest I ever pushed myself to my edge because I was determined to create a new reality. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Like, it's brand new. I mean, I've been doing it for 4 years now, but there's so much that I've had to learn. It's been very, very challenging, to learn all the aspects of entrepreneurship and business and technology that I had never been exposed to before. The coaching part comes easily, but it's all the other stuff that I've had to manage through. And just because you change your reality doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. You're still going to have challenges. But part of L3, love your life, is starting with the L1, loving yourself enough to be able to kind of follow your soul's calling. So, another example of love your life is daring to do something different or that scares you. So, for example, I worked with a woman who came to me because she had been divorced from a 30-year or more marriage. It had already been like 2 years since the divorce, and she just found herself so stagnant and so stuck and super unexcited about life. She wasn't really looking forward to anything. She didn't really feel attractive. I mean, she was in her 60s, and so she was subscribing to that, like, whole idea of, like, "I'm an old lady now, like, I'm not attractive." She didn't feel like she had any vitality. The other thing is that she couldn't envision herself dating again. Even though, society is like, "Oh, you should get back out there." She just could not see what that potentially would look like. And she also felt like she didn't really have much to contribute to a person or a relationship. So notice the L1, love yourself, showing up there and totally sabotaging any possibility for dating. How can you go into dating if you don't think that you have value to offer to somebody? So after 2 to 3 months of working together, she had this complete turnaround around her self worth, because she had been a stay at home mom, and she was like, oh, she's like, I have no skills to, she was kind of looking for, like, like, I have no achievements, basically. And I was like, what? I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I'm like, you are a stay at home mom. Like, that is achievement enough. Like, you raise, like, two grown children that are like good people. So anyway, we had this huge kind of reframe and turnaround around how she was viewing herself, and her self-worth just started to go up and up and up. She started to really, like, feel good about her creative projects. She was an artist, and before she was kind of just, like, seeing it as a hobby, but then she was like, "No, this is, like, a really big part of my life." So anyway, all of this inner self-discovery and work then led to her mind being able to even comprehend and expand into what dating could potentially look like for her at this phase in her life. We really sat down and talked about that. Dating at this phase in life can and should look different from when you were choosing, a husband to raise a family with. You don't even necessarily have to live with this person. It's like it's a totally different game. And so all of these things just expanded her mind, and she ended up attracting and creating a relationship that she says she could have never imagined was even possible at this phase in her life, and she's enjoying it. She's having so much fun. She feels peaceful. She looks forward to life. She's working on her art, and we continue to meet for maintenance because we are all of us are constantly co-creating with life. And so we have to just make sure that we keep on checking in with ourselves. And if we need someone else to help us do that as an accountability partner, helping you do what you say you're going to do, then absolutely, why not? Like, find somebody. So if you would like more accountability in your life, or to see what that expansion could look like, I take one-on-one clients to work with just a few at a time. And so there'll be a link in the description if you kind of qualify or are aligned with how I help people, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me for more information. Okay, so that was a lot that I threw at you today, and I just want to kind of sum up. Okay, what is the number thing that we should focus on when we're trying to heal, rebuild ourselves and our life, or move forward from something? Again, it could be a challenge, or it could be a life transition. Or how can we just live with more vitality in general? Maybe things are going great for you. In this video, I talk about the fact that we can focus on the L3 philosophy. It's something I created, it's something I live by, it's something that I highly recommend other people think about too. So, L3, love yourself. Is the L1, love your relationships is the L2, and love your life. So, this all requires effort. It requires awareness on your part. But when you pay attention to it, huge transformations are possible. And you can create a version of reality that you love waking up to every day. So please give this video a thumbs up and a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for updates about when new videos are released. And I also have an L3 philosophy interview series. I'm calling it a podcast, but it's going to be here on YouTube. And it's going to be added to this channel really, really soon. And I'm going to be interviewing experts and other people sharing their tips, their stories, their expert advice, including more from me. So make sure you subscribe because I don't want you to miss any of those episodes. All right, please tune in next time. There's so many more videos that I have coming down the line. So subscribe, and I'll see you next time.